I had never planned to live in a community, to be part of some structured, neighborly nonsense that dictated every aspect of life. When I inherited my grandfather's land in the thick of Oregon's coastal backwoods, I knew exactly what I wanted. A peaceful, self-sufficient haven far away from the corporate world I once navigated as a federal investigator. I built it myself, solar-powered, rainwater catching, a place where silence was the loudest sound. No HOA, no lawn committees, no one to tell me how I should live. Just trees, birds, and the occasional deer. My grandfather, a proud World War II vet, believed in the right to private ownership. He didn't fight Nazis just for me to be told I couldn't have a mailbox the color I wanted. I felt like I was finally living the dream he fought for. But 4 years later, that dream was interrupted. I first heard the name Silver Birch Hollow at a local hardware store. There, on the counter, was a shiny pamphlet for a new spiritual community. It sounded like some yoga cult met a zoning board and decided to have a baby. The pamphlet showcased a glossy map of the area, with my property smack dab in the middle, labeled as a potential expansion site for their future meditation retreat. My jaw locked when I saw it. I stood there for a minute, staring at the map in disbelief. The cashier awkwardly cleared his throat. I didn't say a word. I just took the pamphlet, drove home, and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon at 2 in the afternoon. That's when I realized this wasn't a jokey, it was a threat. A week later, she showed up. Karen Delaney. She didn't use the gate. She just stepped over the low wire fence like she owned the place. I swear, her linen pantsuit shone brighter than the sun, and her hair, this unnatural lemon meringue yellow, made her look like some kind of spiritual guru. She stood there, spinning around on my gravel driveway like she was conducting some kind of energy test. "Beautiful," she said. "This is where the light flows best. I can feel it." I stepped outside with my shotgun cradled in my arms, though I wasn't aiming it. I wasn't about to shoot anyone, but I wanted to make it clear I wasn't messing around. She introduced herself with a smile that could have fooled anyone. "I'm Karen Delaney, president of the Silver Birch Hollow Homeowners Association. But really, I'm more like the spiritual mother of the community." I blinked. Did she really just say that? She stepped closer, unfazed by the private property sign. "We've identified this space as a crucial energetic node," she continued. "A beacon. It's underutilized in its current form, and selfishness creates imbalance." I stood there shocked. "I'm sorry," I finally said, my voice cold. "Are you lost?" "No, I'm found," she said, her grin widening like I had no idea what I was dealing with. "And soon, so will your home. By its true purpose." She handed me a thick envelope with a wax seal, and it looked like something she'd bought off Etsy. I didn't even take it. "I'm not in your community," I said firmly, turning back to my door. But she wasn't done. Her voice trailed after me. "This land has chosen." I slammed the door before I could hear more. That should have been it. But no. The next morning, I found that same damn envelope in my mailbox. This time it came by certified mail. Same wax seal. Same ridiculous spiritual jargon dressed up as legal language. According to this new official document, my land was being requisitioned for spiritual integration under some obscure zoning law. The deadline? 72 hours from when I opened the letter. I couldn't believe it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a prank. They were serious. I did some digging. A couple of phone calls later, I learned that someone had submitted a request to include my land in the Silver Birch Hollow HOA. It wasn't official yet, but enough for them to start making waves in the county records. The request had come from a name I didn't recognize, Douglas Ryan, a low-level employee at the county office who'd been there for 15 years. Not lazy, just useful. And Karen wasn't working alone. That afternoon, a blog article surfaced online. Silver Birch Hollow's expansion plan with drone footage of my property. The caption? Future site of the Dome of Reflection. What in the actual hell? I spent hours reviewing security footage, trying to figure out what was going on. But I didn't see Karen. Instead, I saw someone standing at the edge of the west tree line, staring at my house for several minutes. No movement. Just watching. That's when I realized they were coming for me. I fired off a formal cease and desist letter to Karen and her legal team. I knew it wouldn't stop her, but I needed the paper trail. Then the harassment started. Painted symbols began showing up on my gates. A crude spiral with a stick figure holding out its arms. The words, "He who holds the light must release the stone." I could feel Karen's influence creeping into every corner of the town. At the feed store, I overheard whispers about property karma. Even my mailman started acting strange. It was like Karen had turned everyone against me. I was no longer just the guy living alone in the woods. I was the outcast, the symbol of resistance. By the fifth day, I intercepted an email that confirmed everything. Karen had been rallying support from her followers. She referred to me as the final holdout. The email was filled with absurd spiritual nonsense about how my resistance was violence and my individuality was fear. That's when I knew this wasn't about zoning or property rights. This was a war that had nothing to do with community regulations and everything to do with control. Then the real tactics started. First, a building inspector arrived. Someone had anonymously tipped off the county that I had an illegal energy structure, my solar panels. A week later, the fire marshal showed up, claiming that I was storing flammable materials improperly. And then just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Child Protective Services knocked on my door, accusing me of having unsafe living conditions for minors. I lived alone, but Karen's influence was everywhere. The threats escalated. More symbols, more signs. The town turned against me. Even Jerry, my nearest neighbor, who had barely said 2 words to me in years, suddenly became chatty, inviting me over for kombucha and telling me he'd joined the light. I knew what I had to do. I got methodical. I documented everything, took pictures, filed reports, installed more security cameras. The works. This was no longer just a personal attack. This was a calculated campaign to break me down. And then came the big break. One night, I got a tip from an old contact at the bureau. He'd done some digging and found an email thread between Karen and Douglas Ryan. They had plans to redraw property boundaries before the upcoming equinox. They were calling it Phase 2. The so-called spiritual reallocation was far from spiritual. It was a carefully orchestrated land grab. I had them. I set up my security system, preparing for the worst. At 2 a.m., the motion sensors went off. I watched the footage in real time. 3 men in jackets with the HOA logo sneaking around my property. One had a crowbar. They were coming to break in. I didn't do anything except flip the switch. The floodlights turned on with a snap. The siren blared across the valley like a war alarm, and the trespassers panicked. One tripped and fell, another froze, and the third bolted. I didn't need to chase them down. I had everything on camera. The next morning, I went to the sheriff's office. I thought this would be the end. But no. Karen had filed a report, claiming her volunteers were injured on my property. I knew what was coming. This was all part of the plan. But I had the evidence. I brought the footage, the photos, and the emails. I laid it all out for them. The sheriff's deputy, Eric Kinslow, knew me well. He had worked with me in the past. But now, I was on the other side. He took my evidence, and we started the legal process. The trial came. Karen walked in, as calm as ever, wearing her linen outfit like it was her spiritual armor. But I wasn't going to let her hide behind her delusions anymore. I showed the court everything. The trespassing, the emails, the financial records, the fraudulent zoning attempts. The judge, Donnelly, saw through her nonsense and ruled against her. Karen was arrested. The HOA was dismantled. And the land was mine once again. And the best part? I didn't just survive. I won. Not just in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion. People started to see what Karen had been doing all along. Her so-called spiritual movement crumbled. Now, things are back to normal. My gate is stronger. My land is mine. And I'm not just sitting here quietly, I'm living here. And nobody's ever going to tell me what to do again.